Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our live stream today. Today we're going to be speaking about bid strategies, finding success with DoubleClick Search, and today is a follow-up from the previous session a couple of weeks ago. We'll be speaking about advanced bid strategy solutions. My name is Damien, and I'm joined here with Simon on my right-hand side, and we're both account managers working here in Dublin. And today we'd like to give you an overview of some nice, interesting advanced bid strategy topics. How do you monitor performance? How do you implement these solutions? So these are some of the things that we'll be mentioning today. Now, towards the end, we will have time for questions. So if you have any, you can actually use the right-hand side to ask them. And at the end, we'll go through them. In the meantime, we very much encourage you to make notes. There'll be some interesting content here. But if for some reason you have to go earlier, or if you have perhaps missed this live stream or the previous live stream, both of them are recorded and will be available to watch at a later stage. In terms of agenda, so we'd like the presentation today to have a flow of what we call a bid strategy lifecycle. Coming from the beginning on the left-hand side, it's the planning stage, and that's where we'll talk about briefly about an algorithm update. That's an interesting one. Then we'll briefly talk about portfolio bidding, what it is, how does it work. And then Simon will take over and give you an overview of some advanced bidding solutions per various verticals. And then how does that tie into automation overall? Now, moving forward, we will skip or assume that you know how to launch a bid strategy, what's the calibration period, and what are the best practices there. Now, as I said previously, if you've missed the first webinar where that was covered, the link will be provided so we can watch it at a later stage. And finally, moving into maintenance, we'll speak about some important aspects such as conversion delay, bid strategy health, how do you keep it healthy, up and running, what are the best practices with offline conversions, and lastly, if anything goes wrong, knock on the wood it won't, what are the top troubleshooting tips, naturally followed by any questions that you may have. So, portfolio bidding and the new algorithm update. That's the first part of the life cycle, and moving straight to the algorithm update. So around last year, towards the end of last year, there was a major rewrite of the whole bidding algorithm in DoubleClick Search. Now, we very much listened to your feedback, and our product team has taken all the comments on the way the bid strategies work and try to improve the behavior with the new algorithm. And as a result, we have an improvement across the entire board. And some of the things that you can see in practice are aspects like startup improvements. So the new algorithm is less volatile when launching a new bid strategy, and it behaves more, it's more stable when you modify the targets, perhaps change campaigns, or if you do manual overrides. Now, it's also we have also improved aspects such as conversion delay handling, which we'll mention in the presentation, as well as improvements in the forecasts. So overall, you should see better performance. Now, the algorithm in itself is still in beta. So it's something that should be rolling out to all the accounts very soon. So most probably your bid strategies will have the new algorithm running sooner or later. Portfolio bidding. So now changing the topic slightly to one aspect of the bid strategies, which is very important, and it's also one thing that bid strategies or algorithmic bid strategies like in DoubleClick Search use and allow you to get better performance. Now, what is a portfolio? Well, portfolio is a group of campaigns that are working under the same bid strategy. It can be an ROI bid strategy, a CPA bid strategy. And within this group of campaigns, within that portfolio, DS will try to maximize the number of conversions or revenue within a specified target. The portfolio approach differs slightly from a conventional bidding approach, where we occasionally notice customers shift budget, let's say, from high CPA campaigns to low CPA campaigns. And that approach may result in overall worse performance. And the reason for that is that it doesn't consider the marginal cost of conversion, which is considered in portfolio bidding. So what is that marginal cost of conversion? It's a bit reminiscent of the economics class, I guess, but I'll try to explain it in nice and easy words. So the marginal cost of conversion is essentially the cost of acquiring an additional conversion. So if I invest an additional $1, how many conversions will I get? And really the key idea here is what we call the elasticity. So by how much will traffic increase, or conversions increase with every euro or dollar invested into the account. And this elasticity can differ across the portfolio. It differs across campaigns. It differs across keywords. On the example here below, we have two keywords that have different elasticities. And you can see that for the keyword on the left, with the same spend, the same cost, we get actually less conversions within the same CPA as we get for the keyword number 2. So there's a clear trade-off. Should I invest in keyword number 1 that brings me the same CPA but lower conversions, or should I actually move that into another keyword with a higher CPA? And this is exactly what the bid strategies try and do. So they try to look for these trade-offs. Now, it doesn't always have to be the same CPA. Keyword 2 may have even paradoxically higher CPA, but it may have a lower marginal cost of conversion than the other keyword. And that's something that the bid strategy is calculating. So really the goal of portfolio bidding is looking at the elasticity of the keywords of different components within campaigns, and then adjusting the CPC to reach the same marginal cost of conversion across all the entities. Now this is very time consuming to do it manually. And I think one of the major advantages of algorithmic bidding is that it's able to make these calculations in the back end, gauge the elasticity of keywords, and then set the bids in the most optimal way. In DoubleClick Search, we always recommend the portfolios to be big, naturally taking into consideration other constraints. But the bigger the portfolio, the more variation there is in elasticity, the more room we have for improvement. So that's a best practice that we recommend. Now I'm going to hand over to Simon, who will run you through some interesting examples and implementations of advanced solutions.
Thanks, Damien. So what we wanted to do today was bring the presentation to life a little bit. I know a couple of weeks ago in the last live stream we had live demos, but we decided to go a little bit different this way. What we wanted to do today was give you get the creative juices going. So give you some really nice examples of what advanced bidding solutions look like in DS. Now, we have examples for both specific verticals, but also some nice examples that can work across the board for whatever kind of solution that you're looking for. Now, last week, or a couple of weeks ago, the guys talked about, kind of the essential bid strategies. So these are the bid strategies that are out of the box. So essentially setting up the basics, getting the right KPIs, and understanding what it is that you are actually trying to achieve. Now, these are great out-of-the-box solutions. They work perfectly, as Damien was talking about, work perfectly with portfolio bidding and understanding about getting the most out of your bid strategies. So whether it's a conversion-based CPA, revenue-based ROAS, or your standard branding bid strategies for position and making sure that you're front of mind for your users. On top of that, of course, we spoke about adding modifiers. So this is making sure you're getting the most out of the bid strategy, and the bid strategy has enough data to actually hit the right KPIs. So in terms of modifiers, of course, we're talking about your mobile modifiers, your geo modifiers, your audience modifiers, and bringing everything together under one solution. Again, important to understand what the KPIs are for your portfolios. So bucketing the right portfolios together, whether it's product, whether it's generic, whether it's competitors. There's lots of different portfolios that work well for each business. But it's important, right, to get the KPI in place first and make sure that we're trying to hit that. Now, what we want to talk today a little bit about is actually advancing those bid strategies a little bit. So when we're talking about advancing, we're talking about the extra products within DS that help complement the bid strategy that you have set up. So one of the great features that we have today are around adaptive features. So we spoke a little bit about the modifiers that we can add. We also have adaptive features for those modifiers. So getting to understand your geo and your audiences a little bit better, but also complementing that and moving away from last click and looking at non-last click models. So when we say advanced in this case, we're talking about your kind of standard non-last click where we maybe have first click, we've time decay. There's multiple options there that we can choose from. Now, today, we really want to kick off with the cutting edge side of bid strategies. So when we're talking about cutting edge, it's thinking a little bit outside the box. So of course, we have our standard bid strategies there, but what can we do more to actually get the most out of our bid strategy that complements what you really are trying to achieve with your business? So what we see as really advanced bid strategies is moving towards a kind of a lifetime value or a predictive lifetime value model. Of course, all these lifetime value models will change per business, but we'll dive into that a little bit more detail. Now, how we really complement that is adding our data-driven attribution models. Now, of course, we're talking about bidding today, and there will be a session coming up in a few weeks around DDA and attribution and how to set that up. But it's important to understand that we're telling the bid strategy a little bit more about the customer journey. And of course, we talk about constantly about as much data as possible within the bid strategy to ensure that we're getting the most out of it. And data-driven gives us that fractional conversions, which makes the system have more information to either learn from and actually build its prediction models off. So, you know, it's about bringing the product suite together and letting all the products kind of work together to make sure that we're hitting the target that you're looking for. So let's jump into the cutting edge stuff in a little bit more detail, and we'll give you a few ideas of how lifetime value can look in DS. So let's touch on what lifetime value actually is. So it's essentially a prediction of what a customer is worth in the long term to your business. So we're looking at the individual customer and the kind of products that they use. We're looking at how often they actually visit your business and how often they interact with you, but also what is the value that they're bringing to your business. So some key indicators here would be around, your basket value and how much and what products that they're actually using and what products they're actually buying and interacting with. Now, it's really, really important to understand that lifetime value isn't a one-size-fits-all. It's very different per vertical. It's very different per customer. And it's about trying to understand which lifetime model actually fits best with your business. Now, when we're talking about lifetime value, it's important to understand that it's also a combination of different factors that we have in terms of the data that's available to us today. So we're looking at bidding, we're looking at your audience setup and your audience targeting, but we're also looking at the customer journeys. We're looking at what attribution models are actually available. Now, of course, this is not a historical average we're looking at. It's value at an individual level, but we're looking at long-term goals here. We're not looking to, a short-term first-off CPA. We're looking at how a user interacts over a period and how to bring them back and actually communicate well with your business to make sure that they are actually buying with you and not moving over to a competitor. So, how can we essentially bring lifetime value to life in DS? So we have two really core areas on how this will work. We have online and we have offline. So let's talk a little bit about what that actually means to your business. So when we're looking at online, we have multiple ways of actually understanding and segmenting our data even more. In DS, what we have is custom floodlight variables. And for anyone who doesn't know, these are variables that are set up through your DCM that essentially segment your floodlight tag in a way that you think is actually relevant to your business. So there's multiple ways of doing that. We can look at products, we can look at geo, we can look at devices, but essentially what that is setting up a new column that looks at a certain attribute that you have on your website. So for an example, we could have, for a hotel chain, you might look at new versus returning users. And essentially what that picks up on is if someone signs into an account or does not sign into an account. Now, this is really, really valuable information that we need to be putting into DS and make sure that we have a wealth of data to work towards. So our second segment on our online areas will be working with weighted formula columns. So essentially what formula columns do is a way to manipulate a current conversion that you have within DS or conversion column and weight it or actually give a value to it depending on what your business needs are. So in some cases, what you might want to do is you have two custom conversions brought into one formula, and you can actually give a certain weighting to each tag, or you can actually make it modify to a current conversion. So whether you wanted to add value to it, remove value to it, based on what your profit or what you're actually looking to do with the revenue tag, we can make that happen within DS. Now, to really get the most out of lifetime value within DS, it's about combining these together. Now, these are all available online, ready to go products. So it's about just bringing it all together and making sure that it suits the business needs that you're looking for. On the other side, we have offline conversions. So offline conversions are a way to upload certain conversion values based on the Google Click ID or the GCLID, and then essentially pull that back to your data that you have in DS. Now, we have multiple ways of actually uploading. We have bulk uploads. We have SFTP, which is a little bit more automated of a bulk upload. But what we really want to recommend is using the API. So with the DCM API, we can have fresh data that's constantly being updated and making sure that we're understanding what a user is worth to you. Now, you can make the modifications based on the Google Click ID of what that user value is going to be. So we're going to give you some nice examples on how these two ideas will come to life. As I said, we have a few vertical areas, but we also have a little bit more of a catch-all for anyone that doesn't fall into these verticals. So let's start out with travel and hospitality. So we have a situation where a hotel chain offers a loyalty program. So what we want to do is try to understand who are the most valuable users to a hotel. Now, as we mentioned before, we have online and offline. So in this case, we're actually going to look at an online solution. So as I mentioned, we have our custom floodlight variables. So with the variables, we are able to determine which user is a new user and which user is a returning user. So essentially, if we're trying to understand a loyalty program, we want to understand a little bit more about the users that have visited us before. So to do so, we have custom floodlight variables that look at each. We have new user versus existing, and we're able to combine those floodlight variables into a formula column. Now, how would that formula column look? So at the bottom here, we have a standard formula column where we have a room booking, which is essentially our custom floodlight variable, so our custom floodlight tag, which is essentially a room booking which is new. And then we add a room booking which is existing. Now, as we mentioned, a room booking is, we want people that are actually going to come back to us. So we look at our custom floodlight variable for new, and we give that a value of 80% of a full user. Now, essentially what we want to do there is build a bid strategy based up on that formula column. That means adding a new formula column and setting a target or an ROI based on that column. Now we have given DS the power to understand which users are actually more valuable to your business and get the system to actually bid to those users and try to pull in the right users at the right time. And then we can have a nice picture of the lifetime value. We can understand that the right users are coming back to us. Now, on top of that, to go in the extra step, would be to look at an offline conversion. So this is essentially using more factors and uploading to constantly upload the model. So things like upgrades or nights booked are extra signals that we can layer on top to make sure that the system understands what's the most valuable users to you. Now, this is all made possible through the power of formula columns, which are super useful and give you that customization that your business may need. Let's move on to an e-commerce example. So let's have a situation where we understand that an e-commerce site has varying degrees of profit margin. So what we're looking at here is trying to understand what are the most valuable products to you as a business. We all know that different products will give in different profit margins. So if we're going to look at maybe your kitchen appliances versus your electrical items such as TVs, we want to tell DS what is the difference between those. So again, like the previous example, we're looking at custom floodlight variables. So this is essentially breaking out each product and giving it a value based on what profit margin you perceive that it can bring in. Again, we're going back to our formula columns, which is all available online still, and actually giving a value to each of these products. So you can see in the middle section here, we have a formula column down the bottom where we're saying maybe our kitchen appliance give us 5%, but our electronical like TVs, etc., are worth 30%. So when we build out this model, we're again informing DS about what are the most valuable options, or most valuable products to you as a business, and making sure we're bidding appropriately to them. So this is combining the most, looking at different users and looking at how they actually interact. So of course, a good audience strategy complements this. And finally, again, looking at adding in as many different signals that you have available to you, such as user subscriptions and rewards members. So using, again, a combination of a little bit of offline and online to make sure that we're bringing the most to the formula column and also bringing the most out of DS, so we can actually inform the DS with the most data possible so we can make sure that we're hitting the targets that you're looking for. So in terms of profit bidding, so we have e-commerce site, but we also have ways of working offline with any customer that's looking to bid towards profit. So this is essentially going the extra mile and getting the most out of the revenue and making sure we're getting the most out of DS, and taking extra steps away to make sure that we're building the profit that you are looking for. So essentially, what is the goal that we're trying to achieve here? So we're looking to maximize profit as opposed to revenue, but we're looking to do that on a given campaign. Now, again, we have to stress, when you're building out these portfolios, it's important to understand what the KPIs are for each portfolio. While you're looking for a certain profit margin, it's important to understand that you're grouping these portfolios in the right segments, that you're grouping the right products that are looking for the same KPI as each other. So what are we saying here? Essentially, our profit margin is our revenue minus our cost of goods sold. So unfortunately, this may not be available on the site, and it's something that we need to actually import into DS to make sure that it understands the cost that you have in the background and give the idea of what the profit margins are per product. So we do say there is a little bit of developer resources here for implementation, but that's essentially just to make sure that we're getting the freshest data that's available, rather than just kind of a bulk upload. So in terms of the resources that we're looking for here, we try to set this up using the DS or the DCM API to inform and keep the data as fresh as possible. But essentially what we're doing here in the background is we are uploading our cost of goods sold into DS, and we're making sure that we're actually understanding what the profit margins are. So using an offline floodlight tag, we can pass those profit margins in. We can set up a standard bid strategy into this new custom column that we have, and essentially just set up the bid strategies as you learned a couple of weeks ago. But in this case, we'll be looking for an EORS target. So essentially what we're saying here is DS is now going to optimize for the profit margin that you are looking for, whether that's through different products or whether it's a larger portfolio and you're just looking to get a certain profit for your business. Just do keep in mind, again, I can't stress it enough, about understanding which portfolio works best. Let's take an example of gambling lifetime value. So in terms of gambling, this is another offline behavior that we have to take into account. Gambling can be a little bit tricky in terms of lifetime value because we have to understand a user over a really long period, whether this is up to a year or even 18 months. However, we want to make sure that data is available to us in DS. So when we look at this, I've given 3 examples of some offline tags that we can look at. Now, the important thing to understand here is we're trying to understand whether we're looking for the freshness of data versus the accuracy of data. Of course, day one is the freshest data, but it may not be the most accurate lifetime value that you have. As I was mentioning, some of these lifetime values go up to 6 months a year. Now, of course, this is quite long, and we want to condense this as much as possible. So it's about being as accurate with your calculations in the back end as possible. So what we're saying here is to have 3 floodlight tags that are set up using the DCM API. What we'll feed in here is 3 different values. So after a user makes a deposit, we want to understand what is the predictive lifetime value of that user after 1 day. So that's taking in different behaviors, what was the deposit value, what were they doing on the site, and building that model in the back end and importing the revenue figure. Now, at day 3, we're looking at something that's a little bit more accurate, but again, it's still quite fresh. Now, this is ideal for bidding. Our bidding behaviors have a nice look back window where we can incorporate exactly how this user has performed over the last 3 or 4 days, but we're that slightly a little bit more accurate in terms of the lifetime value that we're uploading. Now, when we're talking about day 7, of course, this is quite a period, but your data will be a lot more accurate. So this can also be used as a way to complement your 3-day bidding conversion and essentially make sure that you're going in the right direction. As this is the most accurate revenue or predictive lifetime value you have, you can be ensured that you're going the right direction with your 3-day lifetime value that you've uploaded. So we have a mix here of essentially accurate data that we're actually bidding towards, but also your most accurate data that you can check and kind of continually make sure that you're going the right direction. Now, of course, these tags, when they're not used for bidding, can also be updated as a user goes. So you can also have a tag that we have a pay in or a pay out. So you can update as a user pays or loses money or makes money, you can update that tag. And that gives you a real lifetime value that you compare to your predictive lifetime value. But what we're saying here is bringing all the data that you have possible to your business and bring it into DS so you can really understand how your campaigns are performing, how your ad groups are performing, which keywords are driving the most value, and making sure that you're bidding to the right structure. So again, here we have to understand its lifetime value. We're trying to understand what the user is and who the user is and what they're actually doing, and making sure that we're bidding to the right user at the right time. A really cool example that we've seen set up by a few of our clients is around VAT bidding. So we understand that we have different VAT rates across different countries, and we know a lot of our clients are actually bidding in all these across EMEA. So it's a real case of trying to bring in the best metrics into DS, but it's also taking a step away from you. So when you're looking at your DS metrics on a standard bid strategy, you may have to go an extra step after and actually take VAT out per country to make sure that you're actually working to real profit. But what we can actually do is bring that step into DS. So this is looking on the online options that we have. Again, looking at custom floodlight variables. So when we're looking at custom floodlight variables, it's easy to understand where a user is based on their site and what location they're in. By feeding the VAT rates of each individual country that you are currently selling in, we can tell DS the VAT rates and to exclude those VAT rates when it's looking at a bid strategy. So again, it's bringing to life your formula columns, your custom floodlight variables, and making sure that they're working together so you're working to real profit. So in this case, each country will remove the VAT, and then we stand up our bid strategy with all our different countries within the same formula column, and essentially build that out and look for an ROI, which is profit-based. Again, this looks like a lot of work, but it's all available there for you. It's not a huge, we don't need developers. You're not looking at the API. It's a nice setup that's already available on your site. It's just about setting up your custom floodlight variables and putting in the different VAT rates. So it's kind of bringing simplicity, but also complexity into one, but it's making sure that you're actually bidding and reporting to the right metrics that are valuable to your business, and reporting them up to whoever needs to be seeing the right numbers. So how does this all look together? The idea here is to create full automation. We want to bring in the best of the products that we have in DS and making sure that we're utilizing them in a way that is customizable to you as a business. So full automation, we're looking at smart bidding. What we spoke about today is mostly around looking at profit. We're looking at lifetime value. We're taking the extra step away from the out-of-the-box products that we have. So it's combining this and complementing it with our other strategies, whether you're looking at bidding across online using custom floodlight variables and formula columns, or whether it's offline, these will all complement each other together. So let's talk a little bit about geo. What do we have to help you with geo? It's important to understand what areas of the world or a specific country are most valuable to you and what makes sense to your lifetime value commitments and what you're trying to achieve. So we also want to make sure that we're doing this in an automated way. So we have our features such as I mentioned before, our adaptive geo. So essentially what this is doing is if you're targeting, say, the UK as a whole, DS, based on your revenue goal that you have set up in your bid strategy, can identify what are the most valuable locations within the UK that we should be bidding towards. Now, if you add this, of course, with your modifiers, you essentially have your geo completely taken care of. So this is breaking out maybe London, Manchester, and making sure the modifiers are granular enough that we're optimizing to the right people. We also want to get in front of the right user. So it's important to have a good audience strategy. And when you're building your audience strategy through AdWords, we can also complement that using our adaptive RLSA. So what does that mean? So any audiences that you have set up within your shared library is now available for DS to give you recommendations on where it believes that this audience is going to perform best. So of course, this is on our ad group level, and it will give you recommendations and tell you this audience will work well with this ad group. So you're taking away the guessing work of what audiences are going to work with what products. Finally, in terms of shopping, so as most retailers will probably know, we have our adaptive shopping. So this is essentially breaking out your best performing products and bringing them into their own product group and making sure that we're targeting them efficiently to get the most out of them. So we look at full automation. We have all the products together in one place. We're taking care of the modifiers. We're taking care of breaking out the right locations, the right products, the right users. And we're making sure that we're driving the right value in terms of what's available to us today.
Thank you, Simon. Hopefully you were inspired by some of our advanced solutions. So now we move into bid strategy maintenance. So we assume here you have a bid strategy that has been implemented well. You've launched it, it has calibrated, and now it's a question of how do you make sure that it runs well? What are some of the aspects to look out for, such as conversion delay? How do you keep a bid strategy healthy? And then we'll lastly touch upon offline conversion best practices and some troubleshooting tips in case something goes wrong. Conversion delay. That's a very important aspect to consider. It's also something that may cause either sort of challenges for the bid strategy or challenges in reporting. Now, conversion delay is the time between the click and the conversion. So let's say if on day 0, someone clicks and you have an average conversion delay of 5 days, only on the 5th day, you will see the conversion coming in. And that can pose a challenge to the system, because in that case, it will require the system at least 5 days on average to check if the bids that it had set initially were indeed correct. One other point to note is that when you have a longer conversion delay, let's say 5-7 days, it's important to take that into account as well when looking at data. So if you choose a rather shorter time frame, you may not see actually all conversions that have arrived. Looking at the UI, so the UI reports the conversion data based on the transaction date. So even if there is a conversion delay of, let's say, 5 or 7 days, you look at today's date, most probably you wouldn't see that the conversions which were for this day if the click has happened today. So really our recommendation is here, when reporting, choose a suitable time range, usually about 2 weeks for 5 to 7 days of conversion delay. However, the longer, the better. In terms of data discrepancies, usually we get asked by customers, why doesn't the overview tab and campaigns tab match? This is one thing to keep a note as well. So in the campaigns tab, you will see all the data that you have for a particular set of campaigns. However, in the overview tab, you will only see the data that the bid strategy has managed before. So let's say if you remove some campaigns from the portfolio, that data will be removed from the campaigns tab, but not from the overview tab. So it's important to make sure to keep an eye on that, especially when making changes, together with a conversion delay and other aspects when looking at performance. How do you check for conversion delay? Well, we have a handy tool called DCM to help us with that. If you hover into the attribution section and then on the left-hand side, choose the time lag report, and then select the correct conversion segments. So these segments would ideally be the same conversions as you are optimizing towards in DoubleClick Search. You will be greeted with this report here. And what are kind of the key takeaways from that report? Well, in this specific example, we can see that about 40% plus of conversions are arriving later than on the same day. So in here, we would have a significant conversion delay. However, not to worry. this is something that the bid strategies do take into account. So if you have a conversion delay, that's something that we can always react to. And coming back to our announcement on the new algorithm, that's also something that the new algorithm is really able to handle. One point of notice is that I occasionally get asked, okay, so we have a conversion delay, Damien, but somehow the bid strategy just isn't really reaching the target. One thing I would really advise to check is, do you have a fluctuating conversion delay? That's even more complex than having a conversion delay in the first place, because then the bid strategy needs to adapt how it looks at performance. So that's also something to keep in mind. Now, moving into seasonality and sales bidding. Firstly, the bid strategies are very well designed to recognize any significant trends. We have a look-back window for our predictive system that looks back up to 6 months worth of data to check if there is a particular day of the week that you have a lot of conversions on. Maybe the weekend looks very well for a retailer, or perhaps Monday is a strong day for a finance client. So DS is able to pick up those trends. However, in certain situations, especially for less common or less, let's say, more spread out throughout time periods, we recommend kind of a semi-automated or an automated approach for these kind of events. Now, it may be a flash sale that you haven't run before, and depending on the duration, there are various ways we recommend to approach it. For the short-term sales or trends, so a maximum of 3 days, we actually recommend to change the target on the bid strategy. If it's a ERS bid strategy or a ROAS bid strategy, we recommend you to change the target by the expected change in conversion rate. So if you expect the conversion rate to increase by 30%, you can lower the ROAS by 30% or loosen the ERS target by 30% to account for that. And after the sale is over, move the target back to the previous levels and apply a data exclusion on that period. Now, solution 2, this would be something of a longer trend, so lasting more than 3 days. And in that case, we recommend you to pause the bid strategy before the event, download a bulk sheet with the current bids, and then manually increase the bids on the keywords. Make sure to do it through DS to account for the change in conversion rate, and leave it as it is for the first 3 days. And then you can turn the bid strategy back on after the 3 days into the event. It will actually take into account the better conversion rate and the keyword bids that you have set. And after the sale is over, you can apply the bulk sheet to move the CPCs back down to the previous period. So that should hopefully allow you to make the most out of the sales period. Now, moving into more of a reporting section, I usually get asked, so how do you monitor performance at scale? What is the optimal cost? So these are all very good questions. One way to look at a kind of a standardized performance metric for, or at least a health metric for your bid strategies, is indeed the optimal cost. Now, the optimal cost is the ideal amount to spend on conversions based on the settings. And let's say if you have a CPA target of $10 and you have 100 conversions, that means that your ideal cost would be the 10 times the 100 value. So that would be $1,000 to spend within that time period. And if the bid strategy has indeed spent that amount, it will show you an optimal cost of 100%, which is actually the value that we're looking for the system to reach. Now, it may fluctuate in the short term from 85 to 115%, so keep an eye on that. However, really kind of on a long-term basis, as we can see in the example here, it should be somewhere within 100%. If it's not, especially if it's going over 100%, that means that the strategy has overspent. So that may seem a little bit unintuitive, because in here, a bigger value than 100% is actually something that is not optimal. And it may be caused by bid constraints, low volume, limited campaign budgets, So that's something to keep an eye on. Last point of notice is that that's a metric that we can use for ROI bid strategies, but not for position bid strategies. Bid strategy health. So that's a very important topic, something that does impact performance. So it's always important to keep an eye on that. DS will flag any issues in the interface. Most issues such as constraints, and it will also allow you to apply an automatic repair. However, if there are certain things such as missing conversions, that's something that the system will not be able to pick up immediately. So it's good to supplement the health with certain rules to notify you. Now, number one thing that causes illnesses amongst our bid strategies is the campaigns, budget caps on campaigns. We fully understand that certain advertisers wish to control spend through budget caps, but that can actually lead to a suboptimal position where we have constraints, the system is flagging, and it results in less conversions and higher spend. Now, why does that happen? Well, the budget, the spend conversions are controlled and kind of have a particular relationship, and the thing that binds them together is the CPA target or the ROAS target. And the issue arises when we have a high budget constraint with a high CPA target. As you can see in this particular example, we have a case of a fixed budget. So that's a client that wishes to spend a maximum of $1,000 a day. But actually in here, we can increase the performance for that client without touching or without affecting the daily cost. How does that happen? Well, if you have a high budget constraint here bolded in red, essentially the system is bidding too high. It's getting low number of expensive clicks, and if you have a lower number of clicks, you have a lower number of conversions. And then once we get down and lower the budget constraint, and here that's denoted by the search loss due to impression share metric, we can see that actually by lowering the CPA, we can get more conversions. It may seem like magic, but actually it's driven by the fact that DS will try to get more clicks throughout the day, less expensive clicks, hence get more conversions.
I think what's important with their budget caps is to try to understand what the bid strategy is missing out on. So take, for example, if you have a monthly budget cap, your bid strategy is running out of budget by maybe the 24th of the month, but then everybody that most of your users are getting paid on the 25th of the month. That means the bid strategy can't learn from the last week of the month where people actually have the willingness to spend and the power to spend. So it's important that the bid strategy understands that towards the end of the month, that there are more conversions coming through, and maybe these are actually could be cheaper, they could be more valuable, while users actually have the money to spend. So if DS can't actually learn from it, we're actually constricting the bid strategy to perform at its best performance. So it's really important to give the system the freedom as possible. Now, we always recommend with budgets is to not cap, but try to actually manipulate using your target of the bid strategy, whether that's decreasing your CPA target by 20% to ensure that the bid strategy has enough to get to the end of the month, or increasing your ROI target. But the more the bid strategy can learn, the better it can, the better it can adjust to understand your weekly trends throughout the month to make sure that we're getting the most efficiency and hitting your KPIs.
Thanks, Simon. And I think also important to note is that we do understand that managing the budget is an important topic. It's a key metric for many advertisers. And our engineering team is working on better solutions to help you manage budget, spend a specific amount within a certain period, and make sure that's spent in the optimal way. So that's it on the budget. And now handing over to Simon to run you through some important best practices and points.
So we just wanted to add towards the end of the presentation that we make sure that we're covering all the extras that we have within DS and make sure that we're understanding how to make the most use out of them. So one of the big areas that we have are our data exclusions. So we really want to stress here that data exclusions are only used in emergency situations. Now, what do we mean by emergency? Well, this is something where you lose all tracking or your website goes down for maybe a period of a few hours or even a couple of days, where you really see a big impact in your performance. So what we want to say here is if you're having a few bad days and conversions are not coming through, but things are running smoothly, do not add an exclusion here. We want the bid strategy to understand and actually learn from these poor days, so it can actually make up for the next time. The more data, again, that we can give to bid strategy, the more active it's going to be. Again, in terms of excluding for more than 3 days, the system will temporarily freeze bids. So do keep this in mind if you find that the bid strategy isn't changing bids. It could be something to do with the data exclusion that's added there. So make sure you're using the data exclusion in the right areas and for the right reasons. In terms of our non-supported modifiers, we have had many clients coming to us and try to understand what happens if we add different modifiers that are available in AdWords that are not available in DS. Now, of course, we would say to not use these modifiers if possible. You really need a strong rationale behind it, where essentially you're seeing really strong changes in your conversion rates at a certain specific time of the day. But we try not to use these as much as possible. When you are trying to use them, or you do feel there is a need to use it, we try to keep the modifier within a 30% change. And making sure that we're not overcomplicating the bid strategy. If you think about what that's actually doing, is essentially DS is looking at a bid that it thinks it's relevant for a certain user at a certain time or a certain auction, but you're actually layering an extra modifier on top of that. So whether it's a £1 bid, you add an extra 30% modifier at a certain time of day, you're bidding at 130. So just be aware of how that's going to affect the bid strategy in the back end on DS, and make sure that we're giving the right rationale behind it to actually make these changes. We have a few other nice important ports just to keep to stay aware of. In terms of portfolio changes, this is something that comes up quite a lot. Obviously, things can change in terms of the targets you need to hit, or you're creating a whole new bunch of campaigns. We try to keep everything within a 20% rule. So the 20% rule means not to make any changes that's going to affect the portfolio more than 20%. So this could be an increase of cost of 20%, an increase in your target by 20%. So trying to keep things within 10-15%. Now, we do understand that, this is bound to happen at some point. But what I usually say when we're looking at targeting, and maybe you're working a bid strategy, you want to improve your ROI over time, is to try change this in increments of maybe 5 to 10% on a bi-weekly basis. So the less changes that you make, the better the performance is going to be. A nice way of putting it is it's really hard to shoot a moving target. Something standing still is something that we're going to be able to work towards much easier and actually hit your KPIs. As Damien mentioned, conversion delay, really important here. Understanding your conversion delay, so reading your data through DCM and getting to know how long it takes a user to actually convert. As we said, this is click to conversion, and you might find some interesting things through your data by looking at this. So for example, if you have a 3-day conversion delay, you might see the bid strategy bidding up on a Friday to actually convert users for a Sunday. So you can get some really nice data from there. So really understanding the DCM data that Damien spoke about. In terms of constraints, of course, we try to give as I mentioned before, try to give as little constraints as possible. So when we're talking about our minimum CPCs, we're looking at 1 cent or 1p, depending where you are, but giving the freedom for the strategy to bid down where it needs to bid down. In terms of your max CPC, what we try to say is a max CPC and add 20% to that max CPC. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that it's definitely going to bid at that extra 20%. It just gives them the freedom to check. On the other side, we have max CPAs. So again, we don't want to constrain. So this is similar to our budget constraints. We want to make sure that the system has the ability to actually bid up to a certain CPA. Now, it may not look right to you on certain keywords, but it's all about understanding and giving a bit of faith to the bid strategy that it's doing the right thing for you. In terms of our lower performing keywords, so you may have seen this setting within DS on your bid strategy settings. DS itself periodically boosts low traffic keywords to test them out every so often and give it an idea of, okay, maybe these conversions might convert at a different time period. But what we try to recommend is keeping this box unticked unless there's a strong rationale behind it. If you do tick in that box and you are pushing some cost to these low keywords with low performance, you have to make sure that or understand that this may have an impact on your overall KPI, and you may not be hitting the targets you want to hit. So if you are hitting that, make sure you are loosening your target a little bit or being a little bit free with your target. And we understand there is a need to try boost some of these keywords to see how they perform, especially on the long tail, and try to get the most out of your structure. Offline conversions is something we spoke about quite a bit. This is obviously a big part for some businesses to really get an idea of their profit, to understand their lifetime value. So, there's some great use cases that we gave you there, but there are other use cases such as subscriptions, store visits, and many more, depending on your business. Now, what do we need for our best practice and make sure that we're getting the most out of our offline conversions? So we have to be ensured that we're capturing the G-CLID. We want to be uploading at least once per day. As I mentioned before, we try to use the DS or the DCM API. Ideally, we want to be using the DCM API if you're a cross-stack customer and you're trying to understand your display conversions as well. But ideally, what you're doing here is you're setting up another floodlight conversion here. And one really important thing to do is within the settings of the floodlight activity is that you're clicking the button to tell DS that this is a primary source is offline. So this is, as we're uploading conversions once a day, that DS knows that it's not that this is not converting at certain times throughout the day period. It's that we are telling that we're only going to upload on a certain time or a certain time of day. So what are the best practices here? So again, we mentioned at least uploading once a day. We're looking for sequences. So making sure you're uploading your conversions in sequence of when they're actually being converted on your site. And looking at your availability timestamp. So there's two important things here. So say, for example, that you miss a day of uploading conversions, but you were supposed to upload them. It's important that you modify the timestamp to make sure that it is relevant to the day that you last uploaded the conversion. So whether I uploaded conversions yesterday, I missed today, but there were conversions coming through, I want to make sure that I use yesterday's timestamp so the DS understands that there wasn't a big gap. However, if there were no conversions on that day and you need to skip the day, make sure you set that for the current day and time, which it will be now if I was uploading. So that's letting DS know that there were a gap in conversions and people weren't converting as expected the day before. In terms of modifications, now this is something, it doesn't come up very often. However, you might have a business need for it. We do recommend that you do not make modifications where possible. But what we've put here is we've given in the highest order of how you should be making modifications to your conversions. So ideally, you want to be doing this on your online tag. So whether this is on your site that you need to make a certain modification to a user or a basket value, to do this on the site and make DS pull that value in. We can also, again, use the API for this. So before you're uploading a conversion, you make the modification before. So this is essentially seen by DS as just the real value that you've uploaded into DS. It doesn't know about the modification, but you in the back end do know about the modification. You know that BidStrategy is working on the right revenue value. If it's not possible this way, a sense would be to change your CPA or your ROI targets. So modifying your targets to actually take into account of these modifications, whether that's decreasing your CPA or increasing your ROI. If there are no other areas around, you can just edit the original conversion actual value. Now, we do have to stress, we don't recommend this. If you are uploading conversions, we try to give the real value and make sure DS understands that these are the real values that are coming through based on that user behavior. Finally, we're just going to run through some troubleshooting tips. So making sure that you're looking at the right date ranges, ensuring, again, as Damien said, the conversion delay is right, and using the optimal cost to make sure that you're actually bidding correctly or actually the system is hitting the KPIs that you need. Again, the health column, making sure you're not constraining your bid strategy, whether it's budgets, whether it's position, whether it's CPA, giving it the freedom to spend, and making sure that you're hitting our recommended minimum volume, so 20 conversions a day. Again, if things aren't working out and you can't figure out, have a look at the rest of the account. Is this the only bid strategy that's falling apart? Are other areas of the bid strategies, are other bid strategies actually hitting a similar trend? And finally, just check, has anyone made any changes to your portfolio? Is there anything there that was above a 20% change that may impact the bid strategy that could be affecting performance? Great. Well, thank you for your time. I hope you found that useful. We're going to try to take a few questions now within the time limits, and hopefully we can answer them as best as possible.
Cool. All right. So we have a question about the minimum number of conversions needed to enable a bid strategy based on ERS and the minimum number of conversions for which date range. Excellent question. And here the recommendation that we would give is, well, actually, there's a minimum and there's a recommended number. So for the minimum number with the new algorithm, we're looking at about 20 plus conversions a week. But this is really, really the bare minimum. And ideally, we would want about 30 conversions a week, which translates to about 100, 120 conversions a month. So that's kind of the bare minimum. You have to take into account that with such number, the system may need longer to react to any trends and any fluctuations. And need to make sure that you have also at least 4 weeks worth of data before starting a bid strategy.
So regarding profit bidding, does this mean your profit margins will be public with the integration of the floodlight tag, or is hidden? That's a great question as well. So we have 2 ways around this. This is up to you to kind of hide your profit. So there are ways that you can use multipliers using the DS API, where you would only know what the multiplier of that revenue target is. So essentially, by modifying the revenue, no one else can see. So it'll be masked. So when you're looking at your formula columns or your conversion columns, you will see a separate, you'll see a different figure than at the real profit margin. Now, of course, setting up the bid strategy will be the same. You'll still be working to the same kind of ROI, but no, not anybody can see when you add that in. It's just about modifying it for yourself.
And then we have a question about the elasticity and how it relates to CPA, marginal cost of conversion, from a conceptual point of view. So it's essentially the elasticity dictates by how much a $1 investment increases the number of conversions. What we usually notice, and this is a case for any account, is for a given portfolio, if you start increasing the traffic, every increase in traffic yields lower and lower after a certain point a number of conversions. So this is similar to the law of diminishing returns. So you need proportionally more investment to actually yield an increase in conversions. Now, how it relates to practical terms, different keywords, different campaigns will have different elasticities. You can try and calculate the elasticity manually through changing the bids and seeing how it reacts to trends. However, the system, if you have a bid strategy running, that's the system can actually calculate this elasticity and then see what's the best bid to make.
So regarding customer lifetime value, are there any restrictions when uploading historical conversions for customers? And can we still measure customer lifetime value with large delays between purchases? So I think there's a bit of a trade-off here that needs to be taken into account. Now, we can upload lifetime value over a specific period, up to 60 days on your offline tags. Now, what we're trying to make sure that we're doing here is ensuring that we're giving the bid strategy the best and freshest data possible. Now, while you can look at custom lifetime value over a specific time period up to the 60-day period, that will be best used for reporting. But we want to be bidding on something a little bit closer to time. So I'd always recommend something around the 3 to 4 day as being the latest to make sure we're getting the best performance. But of course, using a separate offline tag to monitor the long-term lifetime value to make sure you're going the right order. So this is a sense of having your predictive lifetime value at 3 or 4 days, and you're having your long-term lifetime value. And what you can do for your bid strategy is actually adjust your target based on your long-term goals and making sure that you're going the right direction. So of course, you can have it there for reporting, but we'll try to keep lifetime value within 3 to 4 days to make sure we're getting the most out of the bidding tool.
We have a quick question. Will the recording of these sessions be available? Yes, we'll be sending out a link. Both the previous bid strategy live stream has been recorded. This one will be recorded as well. And now let me jump into another question. Is it recommended to intervene a particular bidding strategy during public holidays that regularly change each year and every year? Really good question. If the if it's a particular day, and if you notice a drastic increase in conversion rate or a decrease correspondingly for that particular day, we would actually recommend a manual intervention. So that would be the short-term intervention that we have talked about today, because it would be tricky for the bid strategy to pick up that day if it changes. It may pick up the increased traffic if it lasts for a couple of days, but if it's I would say, drastic increase, so more than 20–30% increase in conversion rate, a manual intervention would be recommended.
I think we're going to have to pause it there based on the time. So if we didn't get to your question, we do apologize. As Damien said, we will be sending out the live stream. We advise for anyone who missed the bid strategy session 1 to do have a look at that. Some really good information on making sure you're setting up the right bid strategy that's based for your customer needs. And we thank you for your time this morning, and we hope you found it useful.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, guys, and all the best. Take care.